Okay, it is 4:30. So we will call this meeting of Dunn County's Judiciary and Law Committee to order. We will call the roll, or I see that all the supervisors are here. Supervisor Bauer, Supervisor Gilbert, Supervisor Vandermeulen, Supervisor Wilsey. And now on to the approval of the minutes from our meeting 2 months ago on November 27th. Need a motion, Supervisor Vandermeulen? Supervisor Bauer, seconds. Any discussion, corrections in the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor of approval of the minutes?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Any public comments? No public comments. Well, then on to the staff reports. Melissa is on the Zoom for emergency management. Hi, Melissa. Anything that you wanted to add to your report?
Actually, I do have a couple things that I want to add in the emergency management portion. I just want to let everyone know that we are going to be participating in a virtual exercise with the Public Health Department and actually several agencies in Dunn County next week. So I wanted to let you know that we will be participating in that. We did it last year, and I think it was a great day for everybody. We learned a lot, and we're hoping that this year we'll just kind of add to what we learned from last year. So that's what I wanted to add for the emergency management portion. And,
thank you, Melissa.
Yeah, and the 911 side, I forgot to add it because I think I was just so focused on our short staffing issue, which has been an issue for many months. But after the November meeting, I did learn that we were awarded the NG 911 grant that we had applied for earlier this year. So we will be moving forward with that here in the next coming several months, but did want to let you know that we were able to, get that grant and we'll be moving forward.
Good news.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions for Melissa about her report or anything else? All right. Thank you, Melissa.
Yes, thank you.
And for the medical examiner, I don't see Marcia here. Okay. Sounds good. Want to take a look at that. If anybody has any questions, you can send them over. And then on to the sheriff's office. Anything to highlight or add, Sheriff?
I guess I don't have anything to add unless you have any questions. I included our budget carry forward requests that we'll be submitting. You'll see at the full county board. But yeah, other than that, I guess nothing major to highlight. Our budget from last year looks pretty good. That money is available to carry forward at this point. So happy to take any questions.
Hi, Sheriff. When I was at the ADRC meeting before here, and they said that Sacred Heart is closing down.
I just heard that this afternoon.
So how is that going to affect with the, because that's where you take all your people with the mental health problems, right?
Yeah, the reality is we rarely get anybody into that facility anyhow. So we're
Okay.
going to continue to go to Winnebago.
Okay.
Rarely have they had beds available for us, either at Sacred Heart or Mayo Eau Claire. So half the time we go across the state to Winnebago anyhow, but it's certainly gonna be less beds available for everybody then, I don't know how many beds they technically had in their mental health portion, but it wasn't many and we rarely got into them anyhow.
So not that big of a effect.
Not that big
Okay.
of an impact on us.
Thank you.
And speaking of that, I saw in your report about problematic inmates, and I was wondering, you said there's property damage, damage to the facility, and when that happens, is there anything budgeted for that, or do you end up, how do they, who pays for that?
Yeah, we sometimes we have to eat it, but in most cases we charge them with criminal damage to property and then seek restitution through the court process. some devices the county owns, some devices are a vendor's devices. So I think in this case, most of those were vendor devices. So the county really wasn't out any money to begin with, but we still charge them with criminal damage to property and seek restitution on behalf of the vendor. Because they're out, obviously, they got to come and replace it and things like that. But a lot of times remotes and TVs are damaged, but for the most part, those are kind of sacred devices because that's really kind of all they have, you know, so they don't mess with them much.
Any other questions for the sheriff? All right, thank you. And on to the courts. Katie, anything to highlight or add to your
I
report?
don't have anything else to add. I guess one question I have is we have to give our annual report for the county board in February. If there's any ideas or anything you'd like me to highlight on, please let me know. I feel like every year I say the same thing to the committee and it doesn't change very often. We're not like, we don't have a lot of programs, I should say, or like the clerk of court's office directly. So if there's anything you'd like to learn or want me to highlight on, please let me know. I'd be happy to share something different than what I've done the past 5 years.
I just want to make a comment. I see you said Judge Mayer is back. Is she okay 100% or is she just going moving slow? Congratulations, she's back.
Yes,
Anyway.
I guess I don't feel comfortable speaking to that, but she's back at work today and I hope it was a good day for her and she'll have court hearings tomorrow. So.
Good news. Thank you, Katie, and we'll think. I'll think and see if there's anything you think of for your report. All right, and we'll move on to the district attorney's report that you have in your packets. Andrea, anything to add or highlight?
No, I had a last minute canceled jury trial, so I was able to come. So happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Well, congratulations on the door prize victory. Looks like it was well earned. Okay, move on to child support. Josie, anything to highlight or add to your report?
Just to add that I think you'll all be learning more about the county's new project to look at replacing SAP, and I will be a pit crew leader on one of those smaller subcommittees in the coming year. So more about that in future months, I'm sure.
All right.
And I can take any questions.
Thank you, Josie. Okay. Item number,
Can
go
I
ahead.
interrupt? I apologize. I think we
Sure.
skipped over CJCC.
Oh my
Sorry.
I need the cataract surgery too, Carl. Sorry, Sarah. Criminal justice. Do you have anything to add or?
Yeah, I would just
highlight?
add that our grants this year are on track to be fully expended. Some of them will be moving or carrying to next year. So we've happily underspent our levy budget, but we are looking good on the grant front. So it can be a little bit confusing on these reports as far as what's remaining. But overall, things are going well. Happy to address any questions that you might have.
Supervisor Bauer.
So what happens if you don't receive the grants? I mean, does the program just go away or what do you do with it? Like the TOP program, you said you got it for 2024. What if you didn't get it? Like, you know?
Yeah, so if we didn't get it, we would have some awareness that things are coming to an end or things are more competitive. That grant in particular is a non-competitive process. Once we get in every 4 years, it'll be competitive again. So, but grant funding, right, when it ends, there's a risk that the program would end if there is an additional funding that we secure, whether it's through grants or county levy. So yes, so those are risks that we take with the programs, but grants do allow us to pilot new programs, try things out to see if things are effective as we anticipate they will be or not. So they're nice for starting money. But that unpredictability does make it a little bit risky. Some of the funds are more sustainable and more anticipated, like our TAD funding each year.
Mhm. Also, one more question. I read through that 669 bill that's pending. It's a pending legislation. I understand they can use government facilities to house homeless and the money distributed. Can you elaborate on that a little bit or?
I don't know much more than what you've probably read. I do know that there potentially would allow some fining and of individuals if they're sleeping or located at a place that they shouldn't be. So there are some mechanisms in there to kind of look to see where people can stay. But then there would be an enforcement mechanism where if people weren't, where it was allowable that could be, somebody could be taken to jail potentially for vagrancy or what have you. So no additional details other than what you've read on the official kind of blog. Yep.
All right, thank you.
That was my question too.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Thank you, Sarah. Number 6, this comes from the amended agenda that I reached out to some people about last Friday. It's about just a discussion of Dunn County's policies on fentanyl test strips. And just for some background, I heard recently that up in Polk County, there was a resolution to forego or ban the county's administration of these test strips. And I was talking to someone up there, and then I had some subsequent conversations with some neighbors, and I realized that I don't know much about it or what the county does regarding these test strips. And I was unclear if up in Polk County it was the whole county or if law enforcement was excluded from that. And so I reached out to the sheriff and Sarah to ask if they could just let the committee know what the county does with test strips, how they feel about them, how they administer them. And Sarah suggested reaching out to KT in the health department, and she was nice enough to come today to talk about this. So KT, would you mind speaking a little bit about the county's use of administering of fentanyl strips? Anything else you'd like to share about it? Test strips.
Good evening, everybody. So if we have not met, my name is KT. I'm the Dunn County Health Department Director. So in Dunn County, through the health department, we have a harm reduction program. And so we are a satellite of Vivint Health. And so what that means is that we are a needle exchange site, and we do have some harm reduction services such as Narcan and fentanyl test strips for folks that are using and come in to do an exchange. So right now, we only provide fentanyl test strips as a satellite, and we adhere to the MOU that we have with Vivint, and we adhere to their policies and policies in our MOU and procedure that they put forward. And so that's exclusively where we're at right now. We are pursuing a public health vending machine or kiosk, at which we will have some safer injection kits, which will include fentanyl test strips. At that point, we don't have the machine right now. It's in production. That would be grant funded as far as those test strips go. And we will use nearly an identical procedure after we get it cleared through Corp Council as Eau Claire and Chippewa County. And we will provide DHS education on the way that they can be used and the way that they cannot be used as far as folks that are choosing to use drugs.
Thank you. And if I'm correct, the idea is that you can test other drugs for fentanyl, or that's what they're used for? Okay.
Yep. So the test kits can be reconstituted. I'm sorry, that's not the right word. The drug can be reconstituted in deionized water or whatever water they have, following this dose of reality kind of how-to, which is produced by the state of Wisconsin, DHS, and it gives instructions on how to use them in water, and then what the strip itself looks like. So thinking about a pregnancy test or a lateral flow test, a lot of people have seen them in COVID. You put the moisture, the strip in the moisture, and it pulls the solution up through the test kit. And then one line means that it was detected, and 2 lines mean that it was not detected. There are very clear instructions both here and in the verbal guidance that just because it's not detected doesn't mean that it's not there. It's just not in what was tested. So there is some very clear discussion about the risks of using substances and the risks of using test kits. And this again is not to say that it's safe, it's to say that we are reducing the harm of this.
Thank you, KT.
Are these generally available? I mean, you can get them from Walmart, for instance.
Amazon, yeah.
Okay. And what's the argument for the county providing them as well?
So why should we, in addition to? It's a reduction of barriers to use them. So we know that if we can, as a fentanyl test strip is an evidence-based intervention that can reduce overdose deaths. And that's why we're doing it.
May I also ask then, why are some counties banning it?
Well, to be clear, they did not. It did not pass in
okay.
Polk County. I did not watch the recording, so I'm not sure what the arguments for it were. But Sheriff, did you have anything you want to add? Do you use them in law enforcement, carry them?
Just in our behavioral health officer position and through the jail, we do provide them in cases where we believe somebody is substance dependent and we want them to be safe. We'd much rather, we don't want to respond to overdose deaths, and this is what it's trying to prevent. We know people are going to continue to use. If they're going to continue to use, at least we don't want them to overdose because they bought some pot off the street and think it's safe, and now turns out it's laced with fentanyl. And to give you a little background on this, 8-9 months ago, fentanyl test strips were illegal in the state of Wisconsin. They were considered drug paraphernalia. State law changed and they passed to make fentanyl test strips legal in the state of Wisconsin. So I think that's probably why you're seeing it become a little more popular. Polk County's got a push to ban the distribution of them for some reason. But it's to prevent overdose deaths. We're starting to see fentanyl laced with marijuana. I just received some information the other day. I can't remember if it was Hudson or La Crosse, but they seized 3 very large buds of marijuana that would normally look like marijuana. And the officer that seized them was kind of suspicious of them and got it back to the agency and tested them for fentanyl. And sure enough, they tested positive for fentanyl. So you got a 16-year-old kid that's buying pot off the street thinking he's going to get high and sit around and eat Cheetos. But the reality is he's getting hooked on fentanyl meanwhile, and now he's becoming a opioid or meth addicted, person. So it's KT kind of hit it. It's a harm reduction thing. We certainly don't want to respond to overdose deaths. And we know people are going to continue to use. We're not encouraging them to use, but we're trying to save their lives.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Sarah, did you have something you'd like to add, please?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate us having this discussion, this conversation. So I just did some quick research in the last couple of days, just as far as really why we're doing them. So as KT mentioned and Sheriff, these are effective, low-cost harm reduction tools that are out there and available for people who use drugs. It is proven to be effective in reducing overdoses, and it lowers the risk that drug users have. When we're talking about drug use, we're talking about high-risk drug use. Unfortunately, the drug supply chain has changed drastically over the last couple of decades. Some stats that we can share, in 2021, 220 people died each day from opioid overdose. So that's over 107,000. But the proportion of those deaths involving stimulants contaminated with fentanyl has increased. It went from 0.6%, so 235 deaths in 2010, to 32.3%, so 34,000 deaths in 2021. So what used to be methamphetamine was, people didn't have an overdose. You might have had a heart attack or a stroke, but you're not necessarily having an overdose. Those drugs are contaminated. So we are seeing that in the drug use that's going on. As Sheriff mentioned, we're focused on those that are at high risk. They're high risk to begin with. They're in the criminal justice system when they're incarcerated and released. That's the highest risk for overdose. These are known individuals as far as their use. They're connected with services as far as, for the most part, for some of them that we're working with anyways, for treatment. So really the harm reduction is about keeping them alive in order for them to engage in treatment that they need to get well. They used to say it was 7 stints in rehab to get well. Now they're saying 30. So when we're talking about a loved one or somebody in our community or somebody we represent in our job, it really is about saving lives for those that are most vulnerable at risk for overdose, with a low cost effective measure to do so. These a little bit of stats from my staff. So I've got program people that have people in their programs, and they're focused on treatment. So we know that 7 kits were given out last year. One of them was confirmed to be used. It was used, and they ended up doing less drugs and then started getting their friends testing their drugs in order to say, maybe we shouldn't be doing this, maybe we should be thinking about treatment. So these are ways that we can intervene with that treatment. I'm just going to hand around a CDC, just a 1-page handout, and it really uses the cookie method. So we got chocolate chip cookie here. We're taking a slice of it, we're testing it. Maybe there's a cookie or chocolate chip piece in that, and maybe there's not. So that's where it doesn't always get detected, but when there's cross contaminations of the drugs, there's a pile of fentanyl here, there's a pile of meth here, there's a pile of something else here. Things are all getting mixed up, whether that's inadvertent contamination. There's a lot of skepticism about intentional contamination, but regardless, there's more fentanyl, and that synthetic opioid that's 50 times more deadly than heroin. So this is intensely strong drugs that is getting mixed in with other drugs. And it's just a little bit of, what Wisconsin made legal. Other states, some of them are starting to come around and some of them it's still illegal. But it really does provide a tool for harm reduction. It allows individuals to know and make a decision for themselves. Do I want to use this drug or do I not? But overall, it's part of the shift that we're seeing is just people don't know what they're buying anymore. But the research says that this strategy, that there's no evidence that the use of fentanyl test strips increases drug use. It's not a fact. So I think a lot of it is myth. Some of the, harm reduction can be controversial, but when we're talking about this tool and we're talking about people in our community that are already at high risk, this can reduce their risk of death.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, KT?
Can I share one other thing? So the state of Wisconsin did send out fentanyl test strips, and currently 41 counties are distributing them. One county has stopped.
Thank you.
Is there thinking that drug use ought to be dangerous in order to discourage the use of it, or?
I can't speak to that.
Okay.
What's your guys' opinion on legalizing marijuana then if fentanyl is getting laced into marijuana? I don't,
You want my opinion? No, we should not legalize marijuana. I don't care how much money the state thinks they can make off from tax revenue and stuff like that. Personally, I've never met a meth user that didn't start with marijuana, and I've asked a lot of them. And people say, well, marijuana is harmless, blah, blah, blah. That may be the case for some people, but honest to God, I have people that I've arrested for possession of methamphetamines. I ask every single one of them. So did you start with meth? Well, what do you mean? Was meth the first drug of your choice? Well, no, I started smoking weed. Okay. I'm not gonna get in a debate whether or not there's medical uses for it. There certainly is if it's controlled correctly. But legalizing recreational marijuana has proven to be a nightmare in many, many states, starting with Colorado, Minnesota, all around us, Michigan. It's a nightmare. They can't keep it out of their schools. These kids are smoking THC vapes in schools, and they're bringing edibles to schools and things like that. It's become a nightmare. The Rocky Mountain HIDA report is something that I just put some of our local representatives on. It's a report that comes out annually about the use of marijuana and the effects on the community. Everything skyrockets when they legalize marijuana in these other states. The motor vehicle crashes involving the use of marijuana, things like that. And I don't see any benefit, because the reality is what the state's going to cost on treatment and all the other things that come along with that is not going to be a benefit to the taxpayers.
Thanks, Sheriff. And thank you all for bringing us those numbers and letting us know what the county is doing with the with the test strips. I've just heard a couple close personal stories of people who have relatives, younger teenagers, 20s, who didn't seem to be on the path of needing treatment or anything. And from where I'm sitting, it's a similar path that I was on, in your 20s, and then overdosed on fentanyl when friends of theirs were saying they were taking, I don't know, ecstasy or something. And it's pretty frightening. And I appreciate all the work being done to abate the harm. Anybody have any other questions? All right, thank you. And no consideration of actions or reports from the committee. Resolutions or ordinances. And anybody have any announcements? All right. The next meeting is February 26th at 4:30, and we are adjourned.